Miguel, my wonderful brother-in-law, realized that his brother wasn't treating me well and decided to take action. He came to the country house where we were staying and offered me the affection and attention that I so desired, even with my round little one in a special way, doing with me everything that Carlos didn't do in an intimate moment. Miguel filled me with liquid affection and showed me a side of love that I had never experienced before. I had never allowed myself to give in to temptation, but Miguel knew how to touch my heart. He deserved every part of me. And now, whenever he looks for me, I surrender without hesitation, as if I had finally found a space where I belong. But before continuing, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. Now, let's get to the story, because that's what you like. I always thought that love was enough, that with patience and time I could overcome Carlos' cold gaze, the dry answers and the silence. El Carria went inside. I fooled myself every day thinking that it was normal, that TZ was just busy, distracted, deep down. I knew beyond the tiredness of the day. So when Eli, who steps him de na de campus test nosa ch does he want to try, I asked myself with a discreet hope, but as soon as we arrived he disappeared into his cell phone in meetings and calls. I watched from the balcony going alone with the screen while I remained invisible like an accessory forgotten in the corner of an empty room. It was on that first night that I noticed Miguel's gaze. He was not like Carlos, in fact. They were opposites of each other. Carlos was all control, seriousness and constant impatience. Miguel, on the other hand, he seemed to have the kindness of someone who knew how to listen, who was always present, who observed beyond words. It was he who found me sitting alone looking at the sky, trying to muffle the tightness that seemed to increase with each minute. "Are you okay?" he asked, sitting next to me with a low voice, almost a whisper. That calm tone caught me off guard. Few people asked me that, and even fewer with the intention of really hearing the answer. "Yes, just tired," I answered with my gaze lost in the trees that swayed in the wind. But I knew he didn't believe me. I felt when his gaze stopped on me, heavy and soft at the same time, and somehow not I managed to avoid it. I let the words out, "Because sometimes I think Carlos doesn't see me anymore," I whispered, not wanting to face Miguel. He remained silent, just listening, and that was like an invitation to let it all out. The pain I was hiding, the weight I always seemed to carry alone, and Miguel, he was there, just listening to me. Each word seemed to free me from a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. "You deserve to be treated better than this, Anna," he said with a firmness I didn't expect. "Carlos, he never saw what you really are." There was something in his tone, a mixture of affection and contained anger, that made me look away, and into his eyes, and at that moment, everything I felt, the loneliness, the helplessness, the desire to be noticed, seemed to find an echo in his gaze. I had never noticed, but Miguel had a vulnerable expression, as if he were hiding a feeling he himself avoided facing. That silence between us said more than anything else. The word was as if we were overcome by mutual pain, and at that moment a dangerous step was about to be taken, but at the same time it didn't seem wrong. It seemed somehow inevitable. The conversation with Miguel that night was etched in my mind like a beacon, and with each chance encounter, each exchange of glances, I felt more confused. He was the only one who seemed to see what I was hiding, my vulnerability, the tiredness of someone who no longer knew if they still had the strength to fight for a worn-out relationship, and with him everything became easier. His presence was light, while Carlos's was dense, almost oppressive. The next afternoon Carlos left early to take care of some important matters. I had already gotten used to seeing him prioritize everything except the two of us. Miguel kept claiming that he also needed some time away from his brother. I didn't ask much. I was just thankful for not having to face another day alone, trapped in my own loneliness. We sat on the porch in silence. Watching the sunset, the golden light fell gently over the mountains, and the silence between us was not uncomfortable. On the contrary, it was welcoming. Miguel finally broke the silence. "You know, Anna, I never understood why my brother is so cold to you." I tried to smile, but his words touched me too deeply. Maybe he was never really in love. Or maybe he loves his job more than anything. Miguel shook his head as if trying to understand. "Have you ever thought about what it would be like to live without this? Without having to beg for someone's attention?" He didn't need to say anything else. I had already thought about it. What would my life be like without the constant pain of feeling invisible, without the weight of a love that always seemed to be slipping through my fingers? But it was scary to admit it out loud. "It's easier said than done," I replied, trying to look away, but Miguel kept watching me, and it was impossible to escape. That look he saw beyond what I wanted to show. He came a little closer, almost as if he was about to make a confession. "Anna, you deserve someone who is by your side, someone who sees how much you are worth without needing external reasons." I felt the light touch of his hand on mine. It wasn't an invasive touch, it was a silent gesture, almost shy, but it caused a whirlwind of emotions. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to organize my thoughts, but the warmth of his touch seemed to echo something I was trying to suppress. "Sorry," he murmured, pulling my hand away, but deep down I didn't want him to pull away. "It's not okay," I whispered, looking at him, realizing how our looks said much more than words could express. There was an attraction there, yes, but it was more than that. It was a connection that went beyond the physical. I saw something in him that made me feel alive again, that reminded me of what I had already forgotten. The sunset enveloped us in a soft shadow, and without realizing I leaned in a little more. He didn't pull back, his eyes still fixed on mine as if waiting for some sign, and it was there in the middle of everything we couldn't say that our lips met. It was a light, hesitant touch, like someone testing a limit that they know shouldn't be crossed, but that hesitation didn't last long. The intensity grew, and in a matter of seconds we were giving ourselves over to a deep kiss full of a desire that I could no longer contain myself. I pulled away, taking a deep breath, my heart racing. Miguel and I smiled, a sad smile, as if he knew the weight of that moment as much as I did. There was no need to say anything. "Anna, I know." After that kiss, everything changed. It was as if a veil had fallen. I knew that it couldn't happen again, but at the same time, I felt that something in me was finally awakening. In the days that followed, Miguel and I exchanged glances and discreet smiles, carrying a secret that only the two of us knew. Carlos, as always, seemed to be an addition to everything. The endless meetings, the work calls, the time spent away from home. None of that changed, but I changed. I was no longer willing to ignore my own feelings. Each encounter with Miguel was like a spark. No matter how much I tried to control it, the attraction grew stronger and stronger. One night, Carlos was called to an emergency meeting and he left in a hurry. I knew what that meant. He wouldn't be back until late that night. Maybe he wouldn't come back at all. When Miguel appeared in the hallway, our eyes met as if we were waiting for each other. This time, there was no hesitation. He pulled me into his arms, and everything I felt, all the anguish and repressed desire, came to the surface. His touch was different from anything I had ever experienced there. In Miguel's arms, I finally felt complete. That night our bodies met as if they had always belonged to each other. Every touch, every kiss, was a mixture of desire and understanding, as if he was the only one who truly saw me. Time stood still, and in that moment, I didn't want to think about the consequences. All that mattered was him and me there together without barriers. But the weight of what we were doing fell upon us. When the sun began to rise, I knew that it couldn't last, that we were treading on dangerous territory, but something inside me told me that I needed that feeling more than I feared the consequences. In the following weeks, the encounters with Miguel became a secret for Sante in my life. He was the refuge that I didn't know I needed, a relief from everything that Carlos had destroyed inside me. But the guilt, was always there like a shadow that accompanied me every step. Miguel also felt the weight of the situation. He confessed to me one night when we were alone in the garden that he never wanted to betray his brother, but that I couldn't help what I felt for myself. It touched me. I never expected to hear that sincerity, so raw, so real. "I don't know how this will end," he said, looking at the floor, "but I know that I care about you, Anna, more than I ever thought possible." Those words stayed with me for days, as if a piece of my heart had connected to his, a bond that I no longer knew if I could undo. We were both trapped in that situation, both of us not knowing where this would take us, but at the same time, neither of us seemed willing to give up. On a particularly tense night, Carlos came home earlier than expected. Miguel and I were in the living room talking, and Carlos's expression immediately changed when he saw the closeness between us. He asked in a cold tone why Miguel was always at home. Why didn't I see him working, as if he suspected something? He stayed home. Heavy, and for the first time I felt a shiver of fear. It would be the moment when everything would fall apart, but Miguel, always calm, replied that he was just keeping me company while Carlos went out. So much the excuse seemed to have calmed Carlos, but I knew that it wouldn't last. We were living in a house of cards, and any wrong move could bring it down. With time, the distance between Carlos and I became immense. Each day by his side seemed like a lie, a weight that I could no longer carry. Miguel and I kept meeting, but with each meeting I felt that we were coming to an end. Miguel deserved more than being a secret, more than being just a shadow in my life. Finally, one afternoon when we were together, I made a decision. I told him that I could no longer live that way, that I was ready to face the consequences no matter how hard they were. "Miguel, I need to be honest with myself. I can't live this lie anymore," I said with a trembling voice. He held my hand, looking into my eyes. "Anna, you know that I will be by your side no matter what happens." I knew that love was real, but I also knew it was time to face it. The truth is that night I went to Carlos and ended everything. I told him that I wasn't the same anymore, that I couldn't continue in a relationship where I didn't feel loved, and that I deserved more. Carlos reacted with surprise, but I knew that it was inevitable. I had chosen to be true to myself and, in a way, to Miguel too. After the breakup, Miguel and I decided to take some time to understand what we really wanted. What had started as a refuge would turn into something more. But rebuilding our lives with honesty, and there, in the shadows of what was once, something new emerged. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and activate the bell to receive all notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos full of suspense and excitement. See you next time.